at a collective with the purpose, moving past the surface to be servants of the greater good, shifting structures and neighborhoods that are often forgotten, providing resources to our community's most valuable resources. We are people who believe in people. And don't let other people fool you. We do more than just write grants. We change trajectories, rewrite policy, revive economies. Mobilizing for economic mobility, we invest where the rest have divested.
We're doing incredible work, and our participation in the EMON cohort has really allowed us to sharpen our focus, to connect what sometimes seemed like disparate ideas and recognize that there is a connectivity between one piece of the work that we're doing and another, and being able to knit that together and create synergy in ways that we might not have thought about before. And just getting really crystal clear about what our commitment to economic mobility work through an economic and race equity lens might be.
So one of my takeaways from our Economic Mobility Action Network experience was the dozens of ideas that came from our cohort group. We generated so many thoughts about what could we do with the resources, with the connections, with the capacity that this opportunity was providing us. And we've been able to move several of those important ideas forward, which is so exciting to see how they continue to unfold. And we'll be able to keep working through that list. The list isn't going away, even though the cohort is ending. So that work continues. And we just see that there is so much work to do in our Southwest Minnesota communities and beyond.
1 in 7 Southwest Minnesota kids is the child of an immigrant. Beginning in 2016, we made a 10-year commitment to close the opportunity gap for all Southwest Minnesota kids. Being able to talk about an inclusive economy and long-term economic development with the starting point of kids attracted a broader, bigger group of people to buy in and support our cradle-to-career work that supports kids and their families.
Specifically, one of the action pieces that EMON encouraged our foundation to work on was on continuing our work with welcoming and vibrant communities. And as we organized Welcoming Week, we were able to gather different communities in different spaces at different times, and all of us with the same purpose, to create a sense of belonging to each of the community members.
One of the areas that I felt really powerful that emerged from our work here at Southwest Initiative Foundation is our land acknowledgement work. Across the whole nation, of course, everybody can get on board with this and really think about the original peoples of the land and how that context is required and needed if we're going to do this work around racial equality.
We looked at so many models of how we can provide entrepreneurship education that's culturally competent and tuned in to the entrepreneurs in our region, but really focusing on people that the market has historically failed, disinvested in, and not taken seriously their passions, their hopes, their dreams. And the Elevate Community Business Academy was birthed out of an alignment between our hope and passion for the region, the people and their entrepreneurship dreams, and the amazing resources that Rising Tide Capital has brought.
In reflection, the takeaway that I bring with me from our participation in the Economic Mobility Action Network is the connection to the amazing resources and relationships, not only with our counterpart community foundations from across the country that are doing the same type of work, but how we can share this movement building to create economic mobility and the powerful knowledge base of data and perspectives offered by Brookings Institute, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the Urban Institute, FSG, and the Collective Impact Forum. The list goes on. It's truly an endorsement of this transformational work at a critical time. It allows us to braid all of the knowledge, the relationships together to really think about this broad perspective and how we can move forward an amazing impact to create change for the long term in the lives of people.
We have the opportunity to pause, to breathe, to take a look at the whole ecology from a maybe a little higher perspective, and being able to create plans as we move forward into the future of our work. So thank you, Iman, for this work.
I get to be part of sharing all of the stories and information about this really incredible rural Southwest Minnesota region and all of the work that our foundation is doing to really support kids, families, communities, all of the people and places that make this part of Minnesota a really special place.
Iman has deepened, informed, and accelerated our cross-sector partnership efforts here in the greater Buffalo area.
And I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Buffalo. I've seen Buffalo in many different stages of its recent history. There is so much good about the community and the people, and not just the physical assets, but the people in the community. It's really an extraordinary culture. And so to be able to, go deeper on that and build a narrative of positive opportunity for all those people who have, who need to be better served by us is to me was a very powerful concept.
And so in our community, we've been making an economic case for racial equity. And as a result of making that case, we recognize that as we're building or creating solutions to make sure that everybody is part of our economic research that's happening in our community, these two pieces of work, the Benefits Cliff Calculator as well as the Youth Employment Coalition, does include everyone, while it's also addressing issues that communities of color are affected with every day.
We've had a lot of intentionality ensuring that this is a cross-sector effort. As you can see from the composition of our team, where we have government leaders, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, and philanthropy at the table, each bringing unique assets and insights to create these cross-sector collaborative solutions that are systemic in nature and sustainable. That's the end game.
One of my big takeaways is the value of continued public-private partnerships and the really important role that community foundations and philanthropy in general can play in seed funding, testing things that can ultimately be sustained by government to improve the quality of life in our region.
In the 2022 adopted budget, we have included $10 million of local share resources. Our objective in providing local share dollars was to be able to support people through a training program that would give them a job that elevates their wages, but without pulling away the supports right at the moment when they are about to achieve self-sufficiency.
Not only will it help up to 200 families as we pilot this bridge to prosperity over the benefits cliff, right? But it will also inform long-term policy for public benefits.
We're super excited about what the county is doing, because that's taking essentially a theoretical platform and actually turning it into a real demonstration project. And one of the other things that's come out of it actually through the Community Foundation and the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable is the Benefits Cliff itself was presented, and one of the employers who was there offered to host an event for other employers, and he's a very influential person.
My interest will be in seeing how the pilot is able to help us actually connect with the people that are going to benefit the most from the support.
As part of the Youth Employment Coalition, we've launched CareerWise Greater Buffalo, a Say Yes Buffalo initiative. It is a fledgling modern youth apprenticeship program, and it's taken off as we speak. So, this region's looking at 165,000 open jobs in the next 10 years, with 2/3 requiring a post-secondary credential. And the largest concentration of young people is in the city of Buffalo. And as a point of comparison, Say Yes Buffalo, our scholarship period, we currently have 2,500 students on scholarship, 60% with combined family income below $20,000. It's a game changer for that family, which is super exciting.
Stepping back and looking at it in that greater context of the overall work, the Racial Equity Roundtable, and using a racial equity lens, and being a part of this network and seeing how it has really blossomed and developed over the past couple of years is very encouraging.
And I'm just really excited that these things just happen to all be coming together at the same moment, after many, many years of a lot of collaboration and a lot of work.
You are more likely than at any time in American history to stay in exactly the same zip code at exactly the same income level that you were born into at any other time in American history. And what better moment than right now to be really, really pushing against that and actually, supporting making an American dream mean something to somebody.
It's great to be in conversation with and to know that other community foundations are doing the same work but having the same kind of challenges as we deal with the issues that we've been facing around racial equity and economic mobility.
It was cross-pollination at its finest. You're working with your team in your city and you think you're getting some things right and you're struggling with some things, and then you're opened up to this cohort of other people doing similar work. And it was just an amazing experience.
We have these big lofty goals and there's so many different marginalized communities. And so Iman kind of gave us an entry point of where to start and how we can focus and hone in our strategy, because we can't do it all. So where is the right entry point to make the biggest impact? And I think that's where it's really inspired and shaped our work on the community strategy side. It's really honing in and establishing some goals, listening a bit more and leaning into the community, that we may not have all the solutions, and that's okay. What's really best for the community should actually come from the community, and they should be involved in the decision making. And so it's more shaped our actual strategy of how we've done our grant making, what organizations are we strategically trying to reach, and what impact, what's our goals.
I also have been completely jazzed by how we've sort of sharpened the point of our spear strategically and brought our partners together to ensure that we could have this very specific focus on the economic mobility of Black women.
We are working on a Black women economic mobility awareness campaign. Later this year, we're working on the strategy right now. So the idea is to create the community will around promoting Black women economic mobility, make sure that the public and our key stakeholders and partners understand investing in Black women is investing in this region.
It's looking at the information from more of an asset-based approach instead of a deficit approach, and inspiring people to be better from that.
If you would now draw a Venn diagram and you would overlap our big efforts around affordable housing, around economic mobility, and around racial equity, and then you would see that center overlap is quite large. Black women are at the center of it.
So we've really pinpointed some areas that we want to focus on around job creation, also quality jobs, helping women mentor, build, strive for quality jobs that extend beyond that $15 per hour, because it really just isn't enough. Also the support of minority-owned businesses. So what we've done with that economic mobility is kind of break it down into even deeper focus areas that we want to fund.
So an initiative that we created is our Racial Equity Matters series, where we're educating the community. We've reached, I think, about 2,500 people now. Through the Racial Equity Institute, we bring them to town or to Zoom. for 2 programs, and it's really built a narrative in our community where shared language where people can actually talk about race, and it's influenced people across every sector.
Unfortunately, we don't talk about race, and racial healing gives an opportunity, a space where people can have open dialogue about their true experiences and perceptions around race and racism. And to know that racism not only impacts the Black community, but it hurts our entire society. And so when we're thinking about economic advancement, we really need to start thinking about how we heal together as a community.
I'm really impressed by the Iman conversations focused on case making, how the right messaging can change the dynamics of conversations and change hearts and minds.
There are things that are happening in Cincinnati, and Fifth Third Bank just raised their minimum to 20. And I take note of the fact that their executive vice president just, shot me an email, because we are just known for really promoting this kind of advancement in our community.
It's really, really hard work. And these last 2 years have been incredibly difficult with the pandemic. But what I will say is that we realized we have grit and we can do hard things and we can get through hard things as a community. So that muscle has been used over the past 2 years. And I think we can use that as an example to say, all right, our next hard thing's coming, and it has a really great ending. So let's align and see how we can all come to this issue, because that shared prosperity can just create the most vibrant community, one that we probably can't even fully imagine yet.
During the pandemic, we were all dealing with the trauma and the crisis. And this group was such a positive experience in the midst of that, really thinking about what the possibilities are and really thinking about advancing the work.
One of the things that really struck me about the group and the experience was the multiple different ways that they sought to engage both the sort of heart and soul of this discussion. So we talked a lot about why things matter and what we're doing and the synergies across, but also really connected around art and poetry and some of the other ways that we can use mediums to create message and impact.
We have a lot to learn from each other and the varying contexts that we are each working in our various communities, but there are things that we can do together.
Both historically, the trust has been grounded in data, and we have commissioned research to try and understand where there are gaps in the field and what that looks like. We continue to use data and evidence, and we've expanded the way we do that to be much more systematic about the reciprocal relationship between what we can gather through surveys, through quant measures, census, and other kinds of publicly available data sets, and grounding that in the experience of what our community members are telling us.
That work is going to be advanced by effective storytelling. And if it's just quant or quantitative data, we probably won't be successful. If it's just qualitative and narrative forms of storytelling, we probably won't be successful. But realizing how do we create the intersection between those two in order to develop the conditions for raising awareness of the issues that need to be raised, but also offering solutions that advance, again, the reform agenda.
What we learned during our community perspectives on COVID-19 and the recovery was that the trauma that people had experienced really required that when we thought about expanding quality resilient employment, we had to think not only about how do we get people to jobs, but how do we help them adapt in this environment to the job. The quantitative and qualitative need to work together in a really symbiotic manner, but we've got to pay attention to it in a way that allows us to apply that information real time in our grant making.
The city is investing, for example, in Resilient Communities pilots, which is one of the largest direct cash assistance pilots in the country. And through our own grant meeting, we're also investing in a large-scale evaluation by the Inclusive Economy Lab at the University of Chicago, so that we can not only just make sure that those 5,000 families in the next year we're going to be able to get $500 a month, how they benefit, but how does it inform broader systems change and policy efforts that will allow us as a city to meet the needs of residents who are experiencing economic insecurity in good times and in shared bad times.
All of the work that we do to create the conditions for wealth building, to create the conditions for economic mobility, to create the conditions for community safety, and so on. All of it, all of the solutions that we need to find in order to solve those challenges or meet those challenges will come from people working together, people dreaming together.
And for Chicago in particular, is that we don't let this moment pass from really doing that close examination of what are those systems reforms that are required and how do people need to interact differently with those systems so that that there is greater opportunity for economic mobility, that people have a solid foundation from which they can experience economic mobility, growth, and wealth building over time.
Everybody needs to thrive, and that means that we have to continue to invest, making sure that everybody has access to those resources, that every kid can walk down a street safely, that everyone has access to education and healthcare. And so when we think about economic recovery and economic well-being, we think about what does it look like for the whole being to thrive.
I am super glad to be in this conversation and to be a member of the CF Leads cohort. I think one thing that's been really inspiring is getting to develop relationships with our colleagues in the field who are in different communities and how available they have made themselves in sharing information with us and being supportive in how we think about the work that we're trying to do.
Most recently, we've been thinking about that co-occurrence of similarity and dissimilarity in the context of federal policy, which is just fascinating. So there's been a lot of really rich learning packed into the network.
We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization. We work on policy primarily at the state level that impacts low and moderate income households. So we like to think of ourselves as a think and do tank.
You really have to think about economic mobility in the context of resilience building. How do you manage against these vulnerabilities? And so I think there's been a lot of work also in connecting the dots on safe and affordable and resilient housing and equitable community development. Some of the grants and some of the thought processes, the partnerships and the strategy work is really finding a sweet spot where those points intersect.
One of the first things I did when I got on was to kind of do a landscaping and interviewing with all of our community partners and just thought leaders in the area about like what economic justice means and what does it mean here in Louisiana particularly. And so there's a lot of conversations about kind of building ownership in work. And that was something that really kind of stuck out a lot.
There is a really neat grant that's been advanced to the Capital Area Alliance for the Homeless to provide pre-development funding for a really innovative housing model. And I think, with the intersection of COVID and climate change related disasters and weather events.
So they're what's called a full wraparound service provider. They have in-house support for, finding jobs, connecting with healthcare, connecting with kind of legal support. But one of the things they're also now doing is they're developing a kind of a communal tiny housing structure. And so these are a growing, popular kind of housing model, particularly for rapid rehousing for the unhoused.
Our work at Louisiana Budget Project is really a mix. I can kind of think of us as like a Swiss Army knife. We are writing briefs to really elevate the policies that need to be understood, that people will really benefit from. So sometimes you get a big win, and that's exciting.
Often, also across the country, people view Louisiana as a kind of an oil state, as kind of a extractive industry state, where there's not a lot of opportunity, and that's also not true. And so a lot of this work is done through like narrative change work and a lot of like understanding what actually is happening in the state.
People say that we're a poor state and we're not. To Nathan's point, there's a tremendous amount of resources and money in the state. We're simply a state with a lot of poor people in it. And a lot of that is policy choices.
We do need a great deal of active policy work. And this is not just in terms of kind of like, lobbying or advancing certain policies, but also making sure the population is aware of what's going on. Providing good information so that people can say, this is something I don't like, or this is something I do like. Let's make sure we're doing more of this.
Sitting in community with people whose lives would be materially changed by improvements in policy is probably the most inspiring reason that our team gets up.
We envision a Louisiana in which all people are free and well-equipped to thrive in life and work and school and play and all the different things that they might want to pursue. And I think our vision is that is done explicitly in a liberation and collective freedom framework where we are naming the history of settler colonialism, chattel slavery, and pervasive systems of anti-Black racism. And that we're naming those things in order to create and reimagine a future in which all people are really free to thrive.
And what's been inspiring about the work that we've been doing with Iman is it's really created a venue for us to assemble a team that wouldn't necessarily work together otherwise. Get a chance to strategize a little bit more deeply is one of the things that has happened a lot in this work and one of the things that I appreciate about Iman.
It was a breath of fresh air and it was refreshing. And it's really actually very inspiring. This has been a long journey and we're not done yet. And working with this wonderful team, it's just been even more of an eye-opener of the work that people are doing.
Where we've dedicated ourselves to the North Star of racial and economic equity in the Bay Area using all the tools at the call of the San Francisco Foundation and trying to make a significant difference on a population level. To me, Hope SF is where kind of the rubber meets the road and applying all of that.
This is a public-private partnership, and it also includes community leaders. And so there has to be just a certain level of trust on all fronts for us to be able to advance the work. And I've experienced that trust firsthand.
Look at the literally billions of dollars that have been spent on public housing revitalization in this country. More often than not, you will find two things. One, that all of that money was spent on bricks and mortar and almost none of it was spent on kids and families. And two, that the end result has been to push the kids and families that lived in these public housing developments for decades out of those communities into surrounding communities. That is the majority of the time what you see. Hope SF has turned that paradigm on its head. It seeks to spend just as much on the kids and families as we spend on the bricks and mortar, because we know at the end of the day, it is about the kids and their families.
I think a lot about resident power, and kind of an anti-racist approach to the work that we're doing, because I think this is a very, a much more, progressive approach to trying to get a lot of community work done, right? Is that we have systems where we have residents at the table.
And so for us, that has culminated in the residents deciding that they wanted to pursue a guaranteed income pilot. And so what that looks like now is just fleshing out the details of that pilot.
We do community events anywhere from 4 to 6 a year. And we do these events purposely in collaboration with SFPD and other community-based organizations, right? And organizations outside of the development. And we're doing it through a lens of how do we change the narrative and the narratives of people's mindset.
We often think about geographic location dictating someone's life outcomes. And I would like to see a city where that isn't the case, right? Where someone who lives on one side of the city has access to the same abundance and wealth and opportunities that other folks do, and not just access to opportunities, but that all traps that make people fall into poverty, policies, systems that make people fall into poverty also become undone from that.
And so changing that mindset of our younger generation, of letting them know that no matter where you live, you can run for things, you can strive to do better. And it's just been that added on caveat of being able to get ideas from other individuals of how do we work with community and inspire community to continue to use their voice, and that their voice actually matters. And that the more we say, the more we band together and use our voice, the more things that we can get accomplished. And so I love being able to be here on the ground, and I can see the different transformations that are happening.
Our radical love for residents is really, I think, for me, what I have felt is the North Star that really guides us, right? And so understanding the residents' experiences, really being able to work in tandem with community, I think that to me is just kind of the highlight of Hope SF.
I believe deeply that if the Bay Area can't achieve some better measure of racial and economic equity, I wonder who can.